The first time hot water touched my skin, I thought I was going to die. The pain was so sharp it cut through my bones, and I remember screaming until my throat felt like fire too. I was only 12 years old when it happened, living under the roof of my auntie, who had promised my late mother that she would take care of me. She was supposed to be my second mother, the woman who would protect me when life turned dark. Instead, she became the reason I feared the sound of boiling water. That morning was like any other. I had woken up early, swept the compound, and washed the plates from the night before. My auntie stood in the kitchen, cooking beans for her children before school. I was tired and hungry, but I didn't dare ask for food. I knew better. When she spoke to me, her voice was always sharp, like I was some stranger living in her house instead of her own blood. "Why are you standing there like a tree? Didn't I tell you to wash the bathroom?" she snapped, holding the steaming pot. "I already washed it, Auntie," I said softly. My voice trembled, and that seemed to annoy her even more. "You're lying," she shouted, and before I could move, before I could even think, she raised the pot and poured the hot water straight onto my face and arm. The world stopped. My skin peeled instantly, the smell of burning flesh filling the kitchen. I screamed and fell to the ground, clawing at my face as if I could peel the pain off. Her children stood frozen, wide-eyed, but no one came to help me. Not even her. She just looked down at me with cold eyes and muttered, "Next time, you'll learn to obey." I lay there, crying, my vision blurry, my skin bubbling with blisters. The pain was unbearable, but worse than the pain was the betrayal. This was the woman who raised me after my mother's death. This was the woman my father trusted when he left me in her care. And she had turned me into nothing more than a slave, punishing me for crimes I did not commit. The neighbors rushed in after hearing my screams. They pulled me out of the kitchen, poured cold water over my wounds, and carried me to a nearby clinic. I remember clutching the nurse's hand, begging her to make the pain stop. She told me I would live, but I would carry the scars forever. And she was right. Even now, when I look in the mirror, the scars are there, staring back at me. A reminder of that morning. A reminder of how the person you trust most can be the one to break you. But life is strange. Because years later, when my auntie's world came crashing down, it was these same scarred hands that fed her, these same tired feet that walked for her. The woman who burned me now depended on me. And that is where my story begins. I grew up believing that family meant safety, but that belief was broken the day my auntie poured hot water on me. My mother had died when I was just a child, and my father, struggling to raise me alone, left me in her care. He thought she would love me as her own. He thought blood ties meant something. He was wrong. Living in her house was like walking on broken glass every day. She gave her children the best food, soft beds, and new clothes, while I slept on a thin mat in the corner of the parlor. I wore clothes that were too small or torn, the ones her children no longer wanted. If they had rice and chicken, I would be given only the leftover soup with no meat. When I complained, she reminded me that I was lucky to even eat. Her children, especially her eldest daughter, Melissa, treated me like a servant. They laughed when I carried heavy loads or when I spilled water while fetching it from the well. To them, I was not a cousin, I was the maid their mother never paid for. But I stayed quiet, swallowing my tears because I had nowhere else to go. I remember nights when I lay awake, my face burning from the scars, and I prayed silently for my mother to come back, or for my father to rescue me. But he lived far away, working long hours, and rarely came to visit. Whenever he called, my auntie would smile sweetly and tell him I was fine. I never had the courage to tell him the truth because she always threatened me. "If you dare complain, you will regret it." And after the hot water incident, I believed her. The scars changed me. Children in the neighborhood pointed and whispered whenever I passed by. Some even called me "burn face." At first, I hated mirrors because they reminded me of what I had lost. My auntie used my scars to shame me. "Who will ever want to marry you now?" she would say. Those words cut deeper than the burns themselves. But pain has a way of shaping people. Slowly, I learned to live with the whispers, the stares, the cruelty. I found small pieces of comfort in books, borrowed from the school library. Reading became my escape, my way of imagining a world beyond her walls. As I grew older, I started to understand that my survival was not just about food or shelter. It was about dignity. Every insult, every slap, every time I was denied love, I promised myself I would not become like her. I would not let bitterness eat me alive. Now, years later, I am no longer that powerless child. I work as a nurse's assistant at a small clinic. I earn enough to feed myself and even help others. Life has scars, yes, but it also has a strange sense of justice. Because the same auntie who once made me feel worthless is now lying weak in bed, unable to feed herself. And against all odds, it is me, her scarred niece, who brings her food every day. It was a rainy evening when everything changed. I had just come back from the clinic, tired but grateful that I had survived another long shift. My auntie was lying on her bed, coughing weakly. The strong woman who once raised her voice at me now struggled to even sit up without help. She called out my name, her voice thin like paper, and for a moment I almost ignored her. But the memories of my scars and the years of pain kept me rooted in the room. "Please, can you bring me some food?" she asked, her eyes not meeting mine. I went to the kitchen, made a simple plate of rice, and carried it to her. As I placed the food in front of her, I noticed the way her hands trembled. She couldn't hold the spoon. The woman who once raised her arm against me now couldn't lift a single bite to her mouth. She looked at me then, for the first time in years, with something that almost looked like shame. "Help me," she whispered. I stood there frozen. My chest tightened as 1,000 memories rushed back, the boiling water, the insults, the nights of hunger. I should have walked away. I should have let her feel the loneliness she once made me feel. But instead, I picked up the spoon and fed her. Each bite I gave her felt like a battle inside me, a war between anger and compassion. That night, as I washed the dishes, I overheard her eldest daughter Melissa arguing on the phone. She didn't know I was listening. Her voice was sharp and cold. "I told you I can't keep sending money. She's not my responsibility. If she can't eat, let her starve. I don't care." Her words hit me like another bucket of hot water. The children she raised, the ones she gave everything to, had turned their backs on her now that she was weak. The same children who once mocked me for being less than them had abandoned their own mother. Later, when I entered her room to check on her, I saw tears rolling down her cheeks. She tried to hide them, but I had already seen. For the first time, she looked small, broken, human. She whispered, almost to herself, "My children don't want me." That sentence stayed in my chest. The woman who once told me I was unlovable now tasted the bitterness of rejection. Something shifted in me that night. For years, I had been carrying my pain in silence, living as the victim of her cruelty. But now, standing at her bedside, spoon in hand, I realized that fate had turned the tables. The woman who scarred me was at my mercy. And even though every part of me wanted to leave her, I couldn't. This was the moment I understood my story was no longer about scars or suffering. It was about choice. And I had to decide whether I would let hatred rule me, or whether I would rise above it. Feeding my auntie every day was not easy. Each time I lifted the spoon to her lips, my heart argued with itself. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to show her that I was not the monster she made me feel like. But another part of me remembered the pain, the scars, the nights of hunger, and wanted her to suffer the way I once did. That conflict lived inside me like fire and water, fighting for control. Her children hardly visited. When they did, it was only to argue or complain. Melissa came one afternoon, standing by the door with her arms crossed. "So, you're still here, feeding her like a saint," she sneered. "You're wasting your time. She never cared about you, and she never will." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but deep inside I knew she might be right. My auntie never once apologized. Not for the burns, not for the insults, not for the years of pain. Even now, as she depended on me, she stayed silent. Days turned into weeks, and her condition worsened. One evening, she asked me to sit by her bed. Her voice was weak, but her eyes held a strange sharpness. "You think you're better than me now, don't you?" she said suddenly. "Just because you're feeding me. Don't forget, I raised you. Without me, you would have been nothing." Her words cut me deeper than I expected. I felt the old anger rising, the reminder that even in her weakness she still found a way to belittle me. That night I cried alone in my room, torn between walking away forever or continuing to care for her. But walking away was not so simple. The neighbors often whispered when they saw me carrying food to her room. "She's a good girl," they said. "After all her auntie did to her, she still takes care of her." Their voices reached my auntie too, and I saw the way her face tightened whenever she heard them. Pride was still her prison. Then came the betrayal that hurt the most. One afternoon, while cleaning her room, I found a letter under her pillow. It was written to my father, the one who had trusted her with me. In it, she blamed me for everything. She wrote that I was stubborn, disobedient, ungrateful, that she had sacrificed for me and I had given her nothing but trouble. She even wrote that the burns on my face were my fault, claiming I had knocked the pot over myself. Reading those words broke me. After all the pain she caused, after all the nights I fed her when her own children abandoned her, she was still painting me as the villain. I confronted her, holding the letter in my trembling hands. "Why would you write this?" I asked, my voice shaking. She looked away, her lips pressed tight, refusing to answer. That silence told me everything. She had never changed. In that moment, I realized I was not just fighting her illness, I was fighting her pride, her refusal to ever admit the truth. And that truth weighed on me heavier than any scar. The night of the climax came without warning. My auntie's health had grown worse, and the doctor warned she might not last long. The house felt heavy with silence, the kind that makes your heart beat louder than usual. I was sitting by her bedside, feeding her slowly, when she suddenly grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Stop," she whispered. Her eyes, usually filled with pride, were wet with tears. For the first time, I saw fear in them. "What is it?" I asked, my voice careful. She struggled to breathe, her chest rising and falling fast. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "It wasn't an accident. That day, with the hot water. I meant it. I wanted to hurt you." The room went silent. My hand froze, the spoon still in the air. I felt the ground shift beneath me, as if the air itself had turned into glass. My heart pounded, each word echoing like thunder in my ears. You did it on purpose?" I whispered, almost choking on my own breath. She closed her eyes and nodded. "I hated you. After your mother died, your father trusted me, but I was jealous. You were young, but people praised you, your beauty, your good manners. I felt like you were a shadow over my children. I thought if I broke you, if I marked you, no one would ever look at you with admiration again." Tears burned my eyes. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the bowl. All these years, I had hoped deep down that maybe it was a moment of anger, a mistake she regretted. But hearing her admit it, hearing her confess she wanted to destroy me, cut deeper than the burns ever did. I stood up, my chest on fire. "Do you know what you did to me?" I shouted. "Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep? How many times I wished I had died instead of living with these scars?" Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. Instead, she let the tears fall freely. "I know," she whispered. "And now I'm paying the price. My own children hate me. They've left me to you, the very one I hurt most. God has punished me." The words hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to hate her, to throw the food aside and walk away forever. But something inside me shifted. For years I thought her silence was the worst betrayal, but now the truth felt heavier. I realized her cruelty had never been about me. It was her own bitterness, her own emptiness, that made her burn me. My body trembled between rage and pity. For the first time, I saw her not as a monster but as a broken woman who had destroyed herself with envy. I didn't forgive her, not then. But in that moment, I understood the scars were no longer my prison. They were hers. After her confession, something inside me began to change. For years, I had carried the weight of her cruelty, believing that I was nothing more than the scars she left on me. But the night she admitted the truth, I realized the chains were never really mine. They belonged to her. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and touched my face gently. The scars were still there, but for the first time, I didn't see them as shame. I saw them as proof that I had survived what was meant to destroy me. My auntie had tried to break me, but here I was, standing tall, feeding her, and living a life she never thought I would have. I continued to care for her, but something was different. I no longer felt weak or trapped. I was not doing it because she deserved it. I was doing it because I had chosen to. That choice gave me power. Every spoon I lifted to her lips was a reminder that I was stronger than her hatred. The neighbors noticed too. They whispered, not out of pity anymore, but with admiration. "She is a woman with a strong heart," they said. Their words warmed me, not because I wanted praise, but because I knew I had turned pain into dignity. One afternoon, Melissa returned. She came into the house looking annoyed, carrying nothing in her hands. "Why are you wasting your time here?" she said coldly. "She made your life miserable. Let her rot." I looked at her for a long moment before replying. "You call yourself her daughter, but you've abandoned her. I may not be her child, but I am the one standing here. That tells me everything I need to know about the difference between us." Melissa scoffed and walked away, but I saw the shame in her eyes. That day I knew I had won, not by hurting anyone, but by choosing a different path. My auntie grew weaker as weeks passed. Sometimes she tried to speak, but her voice was faint. I could see in her eyes that she wanted to ask for forgiveness, but her pride still stood in the way. I stopped waiting for it. I didn't need her apology anymore. I had already set myself free. At the clinic, I started sharing my story with young girls who came in with their own scars, some from burns, some from beatings, some from words that had cut too deep. I told them they were not their pain. I told them scars could carry strength, not just sorrow. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. The scars on my face did not fade, and my past did not disappear. But I was no longer a prisoner of it. I had turned the very thing that was meant to destroy me into the reason I stood stronger. And in that strength, I found my healing. One quiet evening, I sat by her bed, holding a bowl of soup. She was too weak to speak, her breaths short and shallow. As I lifted the spoon to her lips, I realized this might be the last time I would feed her. For a moment, I just watched her, and my mind went back to the little girl I once was, the one who cried in the kitchen with burns on her face, begging for love that never came. Now I was no longer that girl. I was a woman who had faced pain and still chosen kindness. Not because she deserved it, but because I refused to let hate decide the kind of person I would become. She looked at me, her eyes heavy with regret she could not put into words. A single tear slid down her cheek. I didn't need her apology anymore. That tear was enough. It told me she knew. I whispered softly, "You cannot undo the past, but I have survived it. And I will live beyond it." Her hand trembled as she reached for mine. For the first time in my life, she held me not with anger, not with pride, but with weakness that carried a silent plea for peace. I held her hand gently, not out of duty, but out of choice. That night, I walked outside and looked up at the sky. The air felt lighter on my skin. I touched my scars, and instead of pain, I felt strength. They were not marks of shame anymore. They were my crown, proof that I had walked through fire and still stood tall. My story was not about her cruelty anymore. It was about my survival, my strength, and the choice to live free from bitterness. She had burned me, yes, but I had risen above the flames. And in that quiet moment, I knew, I had won.